Another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Quick Time. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying, and I want to welcome you back to an awesome fly. This one is the Half Pint Midge. Very small fly, but we're going to get you through it. Midges often are quite small, but thankfully the patterns themselves are quite simple, and I have no doubt that you'll get through this fly. I want to thank Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School for sponsoring this quick tie tonight. You can see the information below. If you have any questions, just inquire with us. You can either email us, call us, or just head over to our website and you'll find some further information there to help you out if you're interested in it. Tonight I'm going to be tying out of my Season 7 kit. Looks just like this. If you have any interest in still purchasing one of these, you can head over to our website. There are still some available, and is not just the materials for this fly, but there's actually 26 patterns in there with all the materials to tie each of them roughly 5 times. So if you're interested in that, head on over there and grab them. If you're tying out of our individual kits, that's awesome. It's just going to look a little different. Packaging won't look the same, but other than that, it'll be all the same materials. And if you don't have any of our kits, that's fine as well. If you head over to our website, so you see in front of me, you're going to see that there's a full fly recipe for the entire pattern, not only this one, but all the other patterns this year in this Season 7. This specific one is coming out of Episode 7. I had to get that right. So Episode 7 out of Season 7, if you're pulling out your kits, that's what you're looking for. Let's head on over to the vise and take a peek at this fly. Now that's pretty tight in there, so you can see it very well, but I promise you, I mean, this is my pointer finger. So that's a pretty dinky little fly. Did you bring me a dime? You didn't, did you? I was gonna show a dime. That's okay. It's a small pattern, but as you can see, there isn't a lot of materials going on here. We literally have a little bit of crystal flash. We're using our thread to create the body and just a little bit of dubbing up at the head as well. But very effective and cool little pattern, and we will take you through it. So first thing you need to do is grab some thread, your hook and your bead. Get that bead on your hook and get it fixed in the vise as I'll do here. And for thread, I'm gonna be tying, you're gonna wanna go small on this one because we do not wanna have super thick thread, but I am gonna be tying with some UTC 70 in black. You do wanna use black on this fly. It is what the pattern calls for, as it is in that black midge color. We wanna have the appropriate color of thread for it. Okay, so there's our bare hook. Let's get to work. I'm gonna come over here. We're gonna start our thread just behind the bead. And we do need to conserve our thread reps somewhat on the body specifically, as we don't want to build up too much of a bulkiness to it, as we want a nice even underbody as we go through it. Can get that tag end out of there. The very first thing we're going to do, and we're going to do it right up here at the head, is we are going to tie in our crystal flash. So I want you to grab one of your long crystal flash out of your kit, probably cut it roughly in half. What we need to end up with is we need 4 equal pieces of flash in the same length. So just double them over, give them a trim. They don't have to be super long, as this fly obviously isn't very long itself, but we'll match up those tips once again after that. And we'll cut it so we're left with 4 pieces in our hand. And now I want you to line up, make sure that one side of those 4 pieces is pretty even. If they're not, I'm just gonna give them a little trim. And we're gonna tie these in right behind the bead. And we do wanna leave a little bit extra length out in front, because this is gonna be the wing of the fly and the wing casing. So I'm gonna come over top, get a securing wrap, and I do want to try to keep these as much on top of the fly as possible. But once I get 1 or 2 wraps down, I can just come in here and reposition them, make sure they're pretty much just sticking up vertical and by the bead. And then I'm gonna start taking some nice tight wraps to cover it up as I move back and down the fly. We're gonna take this all the way down and into the bend, just tightly covering up all that work. You're gonna have to work around that hook point a little bit as you get deeper into the bend. But we're gonna take it just around the corner, right about there. Now I'm gonna trim our tail off, and I want our tail to be roughly a hook gap in width for its overall length. So if I measure from my hook point to the hook shank, it's gonna be somewhere in there. It needs to be a fairly short little tail. We don't want it to be super long, certainly not as long as the overall length of the hook itself. You can set that aside and probably use those 4 pieces on the next one. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and tie in my size small. It is very thin silver wire. This is gonna be the ribbing of the body. I'm gonna cut that in half. I don't need that whole long piece. I'm gonna quickly bring my thread with an open spiral or two back to the bead, and I'm gonna tie this in on the near side of the fly, right behind the bead. And this is gonna create, again, just trying to keep that nice even underbody. So we wanna take that little bit bulkier material all the way from the bead back to our tail portion. And now this is gonna be the last time we come back up the fly. So we want nice touching wraps, trying to keep this nice and even all the way up to behind the bead. And now I'm gonna take a look at that body, make sure it looks pretty even, which it does, which is good. And now from here, I'm just gonna open spiral wrap. I'm gonna take this forward just so it's a little bit more out of the way. Our wire. Try to keep nice even spaced wraps. This is gonna be the segmentation of the body of the midge. Probably more of an aesthetic for us than the fish, but looks good if they're nice and even all the way forward. And we're gonna take this wire right up to behind the bead where we're gonna tie it off. Come in here, take a thread wrap behind it, a thread wrap in front, and repeat that one more time, behind and in front. And then you can either helicopter it off just by spinning the wire, or you can cut it, one of the two. It's very thin, so a helicopter is quite nice. Again, set that aside for the next fly. And now the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be working with our dubbing, which is this black dry fly dubbing. But the first thing I wanna do is I wanna come in here, and I should have 4 pieces of flash up at the head as well. And I wanna try to separate them. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of covering this up so it's hard to see, but I wanna try to separate them a bit because I want 2 to be on each side. So I'm actually gonna take, while I'm up here and I have them separated, I'm gonna do a little figure 8 around them to try to separate them a little bit easier. So when I come in here with my dubbing, it makes it a little bit easier on me to do it. So when it's done, it's left like this. So I just have 2 splayed wing. And now I'm just gonna take my thread to just behind that. About a bead length behind the bead is where we're gonna start with our dubbing. And trust me when I say this, this is enough to do about 1,000 of these flies. You need such a tiny wisp of this dubbing. We're gonna make a little dubbing noodle, so I just got just a tiny little bit. I'm gonna place it on my thread, and I'm gonna spin it in one direction to get that nice and tight on the thread, like so. So I just have this very thin little dubbing noodle is what we call it. I'm gonna take a couple of wraps behind the crystal flash, kind of coming up against it. And then I'm gonna cross to in front of it. After I get through here, I'll cross to in front. And I'm gonna finish with a couple of wraps just in front of it, just like that. So what I should be left with is just this little bulby thorax with that splayed wing. And done with that dubbing, all we gotta do now is whip finish this fly, and it's almost done. Like I said, these patterns are quite simple often when they're so small, these midge patterns. We just wanna get 3 or 4 turn whip finish just behind. I'm not gonna add any resin to this because that dubbing and being so close to that bead, it's gonna, it won't soak in super well, and it kind of leaves it feeling clumpy. So I'm just gonna do a couple of these whip finishes with this nice thin thread just behind the bead. Then I can come in here and trim out my tag ends of my thread. And then all I have left to do is trim my wing. And I want this wing to be roughly the same length that I left my tail. So I'm looking for about a hook gap in width. It should extend just beyond the thorax, which is gonna be that bulby section we just made. So if I kind of tip it back, I'm just gonna cut it just a little behind that thorax. Somewhere right in there. So the length in comparison, just a little tiny wing. We don't need a super long one. Come in and trim this one to match it. That looks good, just like that. You can see how that wing is nice and splayed. That's kind of the goal, is to try to get a couple of pieces of that crystal flash on both sides of the fly. And just like that, we have our half pint midge complete. I hope you guys were able to get through that one well. I know it's a small pattern, but as you can see, not too tough to tie with not a lot of moving parts in it, that's for sure. All right, guys, again, my name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying, and I want to thank you for joining us for another quick tie. Don't forget to like and subscribe, drop a comment, let us know how you did on this fly, and hopefully we'll see you again next week when we tie up a couple more patterns.